Last session, we talked about how Jesus' body was taken from the cross and then hastily prepared for a temporary burial in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, which must have only been a few hundred feet from the execution site, because it was late in the afternoon of the 14th day of the first Jewish month, a Friday, and the special Sabbath of the week holiday of unleavened bread was about to occur. And they rolled the great stone in front of this tomb once the body was in place. And we know that the ladies were right there watching all of this happen, because the text specifically says that. Matthew 27:61 says, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary was there sitting opposite the tomb. Mark puts it this way. This is Mark 15:47. Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joses, which is a shortened form of Joseph apparently, saw where he was laid. I believe this Mary that is referred to, not Mary Magdalene, but the other Mary, is likely Mary, the mother of Jesus. In the Luke account, it says, Luke 23:55, the women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how his body was laid. So that tells us it wasn't just Mary Magdalene. It wasn't just Mary, the mother of Jesus. Salome was certainly there. That's Mary's sister, the mother of James and John, and probably other ladies listed before that are part of the ministering group that came from Galilee. They know exactly where the tomb is at because they plan on being back to finish the proper Jewish funeral preparations as soon as it is daylight on Sunday morning. And in order to get ready for that, Luke tells us this, Luke 22:56. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. So the moment they had Jesus' body in the tomb and the stone had been rolled in place, these ladies rushed back to wherever it is they're staying and started getting things ready for Sunday morning's anointing of the body. Then, we are told, on the Sabbath they rested according to the commandment. So the moment the sun went down, they stopped everything, as was Jewish, and rested. Now, this rest is going to be very depressing because Jesus is dead and all their hopes have been dashed. So they're going to all be in their different places. Some of them might be out at Bethany in the home of Martha and Simon and Mary and Lazarus, because we know that's where Jesus and some of his apostles had been staying. But others might be in other places scattered around the city area of Jerusalem, because that's what you do as a Jewish person on the Sabbath day is you rest. Now, when the Sabbath day comes, we have some movement by members of the council that are concerned about the possibility of fraud. So this is Matthew chapter 27, the only place that this part of the story is told. Matthew 27:62. Next day, that is, after the day of preparation. So day of preparation is Friday. So the day after will be Saturday, otherwise known as the Sabbath day. These Jews, many of them would have already gone to morning services at the synagogue, especially since it's the 15th day of the first Jewish month. It's the first day of unleavened bread, so they would have gotten their ritual things taken care of first thing in the morning. But as soon as they're done with all of that, what do? It says the chief priests and the Pharisees, so these are members of the council and beyond probably, gathered before Pilate. Now, based on things we've already seen, more than likely they did not go into the praetorium, that is, into the Tower of Antonia, but rather forced him to come outside to meet with them again, because they don't want to be made unclean by going into Gentile territory. So they force him to come out sometime on Saturday. And they said to him, "Sir, we remember how that impostor," a reference to Jesus, "we remember how that impostor said while he was still alive, 'After 3 days I will rise.'" Now, where in the world did they get that information? Because that seems to have been something that Jesus had only been telling his apostles recently. Well, it's probably not too big of a jump to assume that Judas shared a lot of information with the council members whenever he made his arrangements to betray Jesus. And he may have expressed his own frustration that Jesus kept talking about dying and rising again on the third day, and that Judas wouldn't have understood this as being appropriate fulfillment of messianic expectations. And so I'm guessing they probably got that information straight from the betrayer himself. Ultimately, it does not matter, because we know for a fact Jesus did tell people, "I will rise again on the third day." By this time, it's possible that the council members may have started putting two and two together about Jesus' earlier statements: "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up again." Because when that is brought up in the gospel author says he said this not about the physical temple, but rather about his body. So this is the concern of the council now. Verse 64, "Therefore order the tomb to be made secure until the third day," basically until the third day is finished, "lest his disciples go and steal him away, and then tell the people, 'He's risen from the dead.' And the last fraud will be worse than the first." So that's their concern here on Saturday, that Jesus' body is going to perhaps be stolen, and then the claim will be made, "See, he did rise from the dead. His body disappeared." And so they say, "We want you, the Roman official here in this country, to secure the tomb against theft." And so Pilate seems to have agreed that this was a reasonable request, because Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers." So he basically guaranteed that they could have a Roman military guard on the tomb. "Go, make it as secure as you can." So these guards have been now dispatched from the praetorium into the care of the Sanhedrin. So they're going to answer to the Sanhedrin and then ultimately to Pilate, because they're Roman soldiers. Now, how many are we talking about? We don't know. We can speculate. I'm going to guess it's no less than what we saw at the crucifixion. We had a centurion plus 4 soldiers, 4 troopers that were keeping watch over the execution of 3 persons. So that seems to have been more than sufficient in the mind of the Romans to keep that event secure. Would they think they need more than that at a tomb over another 36-hour period at the most. Or excuse me, even 24-hour period. Probably not too many more. I would guess at the most they might assign another 4 soldiers underneath a centurion for a total of 8 soldiers and 1 centurion. That should be more than enough. So that's what they do. What do? They go and they secure the tomb. Verse 66. So they made the tomb secure. Pay attention here. That means they would have checked that the body was there. First thing. Because what good does it do to secure the tomb against a body being stolen if it's already missing? So they went to the specific tomb, checked, made sure the body was there. Then they sealed the stone and set a guard. Now, how did they seal the stone? They could have done it a couple of ways. They could have simply taken a bit of wax or lead and placed it at a point where the stone was against the wall, the face of the tomb, and put that material there and then put a Roman seal into that wax or into that molten lead. Or they may have drawn a chain or a cord between 2 points secured by wax or molten lead with the appropriate seals put in place on either side of that. Either one of those would have been very clear as to whether it had been tampered with. But the most important thing that we should take note of is that the guard was set. Roman guards understood that when they were on watch, they had to stay awake. Now, they might take turns having a little downtime, maybe being able to take a rest, but the people who were actively standing watch had to stay alert, because if something happened to whatever it was they were guarding, a prisoner, material, supplies, or in this case, a tomb, if something happened, they could be executed for dereliction of duty. So this is very serious Roman soldier work that we're talking about here. So they're going to keep alert from the time they were posted here on Saturday, maybe late morning, maybe midday, but certainly sometime by the afternoon before evening came. Because when the sun goes down, that will be the beginning of the 3rd day since Jesus' crucifixion. Jesus was crucified and buried on Friday. This is now Saturday that we're talking about these conversations. And the 3rd day will begin at sunset on Saturday night, and Sunday will be the full-fledged day of counted as the 3rd day. So that is the guard posted. Then we go to the next part of the story. This is Mark 16, verse number 1. When the Sabbath was past. Now, what did I just talk about? When the sun goes down on Saturday night, that will be the beginning of the first day of the Jewish week. The Sabbath will be over, and the stores will open back up again. The shops will be open again for business for at least a couple of hours after the sun goes down on Saturday night. So chapter 16 of Mark says, when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, that would be Mary the mother of Jesus. She has 2 sons that keep getting named in these lists, James and Joseph Jr., or Joseph. So Mary and Salome, that would be Mary's sister Salome, the mother of James and John the apostles. So these 3 named ladies went out and they bought spices. so that they might go and anoint him. So now they've got everything they need in order to finish the responsibility that they feel they have toward Jesus regarding his burial customs. Now, Matthew chapter 28. Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week. When we talk about dawn, we're talking about the rising of the sun. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. So when Matthew tells this story, he's focused on these two ladies, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus. In Mark 16, verse 2, very early on the first day of the week, so that's Sunday by the way we talk about it, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. So the ladies are getting up very early, and they're going to make their way to the tomb, apparently intending to arrive right around sunrise. Why do I say that? Because of the other passages. This is Luke 24. On the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared. Early dawn is a reference to that twilight effect that you start getting before the sun bursts over the horizon. You know, about an hour before official sunrise, you start getting a light on the horizon to the east, and it brightens and it brightens, and you can see more and more until finally you get full daylight. John chapter 20, verse 1. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark. So this is what we can put together from these different accounts. The ladies got up probably while it was still full dark. Let's call it before 5 o'clock in the morning. Once they've gotten dressed and prepared and got all of the things together that they need, they start making the walk to the garden tomb while the sky is starting to lighten up toward dawn. And they are timing it in such a way it would appear that they are going to arrive right around the time the sun rises. Now, while they're on their way, they're talking. This is from Mark 16:3. They were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" That was what they were concerned about, because that stone was very large, put in place by apparently several men on Friday afternoon. And these ladies don't feel, even as a team, that they could probably get it out of the way. Now, they're not worried about getting past a Roman guard because they know nothing about the Roman guard. That Roman guard was posted on the Sabbath day, Saturday, while they were doing their Sabbath rest. But what happens with the guard? That's what Matthew tells us about. Matthew 28, verse number 2. Behold, there was a great earthquake. So this is very early in the morning while it's definitely still dark. For an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. So here comes one of God's mighty angels in the pitch black dark. He just suddenly appears, and that would have blinded, I have no doubt, the soldiers that are there, because when angels come, they seem to be bringing the glory of God with them. They seem to be shining, radiating all of that glory they've soaked up in the presence of God. And so he rolls this stone away all by himself, and then flutters up on top of it and has a seat. Now, what kind of effect does this have on these soldiers? His appearance was like lightning, his clothing white as snow, and for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. Now, what does that mean? It means they passed out. It means that their fear response was such that their blood pressure dropped precipitously and they lost consciousness. They just fainted where they were at. Now, what does it take to scare a professional soldier? An awful lot. What does it take to have an entire squad of soldiers scared into every last one of them fainting? It must take a lot. The appearance of an angel certainly would do that. Now, what Matthew doesn't bother to tell us, but we can presume as being between the lines as an event, is that the soldiers, after their dead faint, would have woken back up, and if the angel was still visible to them, they would have run away as fast as their little soldier feet could take them. And we'll get back to their story in just a little bit. And so that's why when the ladies show up right around sunrise, there are no soldiers to be found. Let's go back to our Mark account. Mark 16:3 again. They were saying to one another as they were walking along, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" And then, looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back, and it was very large. Now, I've shared with you that I've been to Jerusalem several times now, enjoyed the opportunity to do that. There are two sites that I think are reasonably thought as candidates for the crucifixion and resurrection sites for Jesus. The one that is most traditional is found inside of the sprawling complex of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That's on the west side of Old Jerusalem. I don't think that's the accurate one. I like the one that's to the north, which is referred to as Gordon's Calvary. That's the execution site. It actually looks like a stone skull face, or at least it used to. Some of that's kind of collapsed in most recent years. And just a few hundred feet from there, to the north, to the west, and slightly north from the execution site, is what's called the Garden Tomb. And when you walk from the place at Gordon's Calvary over toward the tomb area, you come up and over a bit of a rise. And I think that's exactly what these ladies did, is they come up over that rise, and they can see there in the distance, there is the flat face of the stone cliffside, and the opening of the tomb is easily seen, and the stone would have been rolled off to the side in the little slot that's in front of this tomb. And so that's what I think they saw. And they were shocked because they'd just been talking about, who's going to roll that big stone out of the way for us? And they were worried. And so what happens next? Verse 5 says, entering the tomb. I'm going to pause there because we don't see the angels just yet. Let's go over to Luke 24 next. Luke 24, verse 2. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. Now, what did they see instead? I can tell you exactly what they saw. They saw the wrappings of Jesus like a little cocoon that had collapsed. It hadn't been opened. It just collapsed because his body was gone. And nothing else at the first. They didn't see anything else. And Luke 24:4 says, while they were perplexed about this. Now, before the angels show up, okay, somebody jumps to a conclusion about this. That's in John chapter 20. Now, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early. She wasn't by herself. She was there with the other ladies, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she, along with the other ladies, apparently went inside and saw that the body was missing because the collapse of the wrappings. You could tell the body isn't there. She jumps to a conclusion all by herself and takes off. Verse 2, so she ran immediately and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple. That other disciple here is John, the author of this gospel. Where were they? We don't know for certain, but it is possible that they were in the upper room. But wherever it was, she knew where they could be found. So she ran to them, to Simon Peter, the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and she said to them, they've taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they've laid him. So that's the first report of Mary Magdalene. She has assumed the theft of the body by some person or persons. And she wants Peter and John and the others to take care of this problem. And so we're going to close up today with verse number 3 that says, so Peter went out with the other disciple, and they were going toward the tomb. And both of them were running together. Now, before that happened, the angels appeared to the other ladies.